All right. I just invented a new segment. It's called Cap or Fact. Okay. Here's what we're going to do. There is a report or a rumor or whatever that just came out that I've been tagged in. Shout out to my guy Nick Marchetti, longtime subscriber of the channel, tags me in all kinds of stuff on Twitter. And my boy Za and anybody else that tags me on things on Twitter. I appreciate it. But we're in an era, right, where people are looking for clicks on the internet. So everything that somebody says on a podcast is not a report. I mean, do I have any credibility? Do things like, is something that I say on this podcast a report? If I say, I think it's very possible the Sixers could trade Paul George for Jimmy Butler, is somebody going to run with that and post it on Barstool Sports and everywhere else and be like, hey, there's a report. Sixers could trade Jimmy Butler or Paul George for Jimmy Butler. People are like, who said that? Run it back Philly? Some fucking guy in his attic? Anyway, I'm not discrediting this reporter by any means because he does have some credentials. So let's just talk about it. Okay. His name is Vince Goodwill. Before we get into the report, all right, we got to do a credibility check. Okay. Vince Goodwill, the host of Good Word podcast on Yahoo Sports, NBA writer for Yahoo Sports. There is some credibility there because some of you kids might not know this, but my boy Shams was the writer for Yahoo, the NBA writer for Yahoo Sports. Actually, Woj was the NBA writer for Yahoo Sports. He blew up and went to ESPN. Shams took Woj's position at Yahoo Sports as the NBA writer. Woj retired. Now Shams is on ESPN. If I got that wrong somehow, some way, correct me in the chat. But basically, Shams came from the same type of writing credentials at Yahoo Sports. And so did Woj. So what I'm saying is a reporter or a writer wouldn't want to discredit himself or discredit Yahoo Sports. So there is a little bit of it's not like somebody that works for a company like that wants to just come out and say a bunch of nothing. So I believe at least Vince Goodwill believes what he's saying in this clip, is what I'm saying. Now let's listen to it and decide if it is cap or fact, okay? And let me know in the chat, cap or fact. Here you go.
Philly, quietly, I've heard that Philly quietly could be a suitor for Jimmy Butler.
All right. Does this mean... and again, I'm not trying to discredit him at all. I've heard that Philly could quietly, and he double emphasized quietly, be a suitor for Jimmy Butler. Does this mean the people that told you this were whispering? Were they under a table? Like, hey, Vince. Hey, Vince. Philly could trade Paul George for Jimmy Butler. Like, I don't know, but let's continue.
I've heard that Philly quietly could be a suitor for Jimmy Butler. And a Paul George for Jimmy sort of straight up, I don't think they make exactly the same, but theoretically, it would be a Jimmy for Paul George swap, I believe.
Then he throws out the word theoretically. Then he says that he doesn't even know if the money would work.
Theoretically, it would be a Jimmy for Paul George swap. I believe, I've heard this, that Joel Embiid, who still loves Jimmy Butler, is pushing for them to reacquire Jimmy Butler, knowing that Jimmy is out there.
All right, so he's claiming that he's definitely heard that Joel Embiid is pushing for the Sixers to acquire Jimmy Butler.
But here's the other side of that, Jay Adonde. Paul George was told by management or ownership, we wouldn't trade you year one of this deal.
Well, I'm sure Paul George, before he signed with Philly, had some conversations with James Harden. who probably told him, hey, don't believe anything this Daryl Morey guy says, because he promised me a max contract, and then he told me I can't have it. So that doesn't mean anything to me. Daryl Morey telling Paul George he won't trade him year one of the contract doesn't mean anything, because we've seen Daryl Morey tell a player something and then go back on his word. So that doesn't matter to me at all.
The side of that, Jay Adonde, Paul George was told by management or ownership, we wouldn't trade you year one of this deal. So there's so many different iterations. I'm not saying that Joel Embiid is pushing for Paul George to be traded. I'm saying that Joel Embiid is pushing for them to acquire his buddy, Jimmy Butler.
All right, well, if Joel Embiid is pushing for the Sixers to acquire Jimmy Butler, then he is pushing for Paul George to be traded, because Joel Embiid is not a dumbass, and he knows how NBA salaries work, and he can do basic math. There's 3 max contracts on the team. There's no more room for another max contract. Joel Embiid knows that. He can't be pushing for a Jimmy Butler trade without pushing for a Paul George trade. Unless he's telling him to trade Tyrese Maxey. What are we saying here?
But can you even trust Joel Embiid, who can't get on the floor?
What does that mean?
Trust Joel Embiid, who can't. Saying that Joel Embiid.
Does he mean can you trust Joel Embiid to be healthy? No, you can't. But that has nothing to do with this rumor at all.
Is pushing for them to acquire his buddy, Jimmy Butler. But can you even trust Joel Embiid, who can't get on the floor?
Does that mean can you trust the words Joel Embiid says? Or does that mean you shouldn't trade for Jimmy Butler because Joel Embiid can't stay healthy? If that's the case, then you should trade for Jimmy Butler, and I'm going to tell you why, but let's finish.
Yeah, for Jimmy Butler, is that what you'd want to sign up for? Is that where you would find your joy? You know, he wasn't wearing Philadelphia 76ers colorway shoes, right? He's wearing those Phoenix Suns colorways.
Yeah, listen, man, both these guys are smirking it up. Theoretically, hypothetically, I don't know if the money would work. I've been hearing things from unnamed sources quietly. This is cap. C-A-P in capital letters. And I actually think Vincent Goodwill, is doing Yahoo Sports a disservice by, I'm not saying he's lying, but you can't be credentialed like this and just say random shit. You have to have at least something to back it up. So I don't think he's doing a service to Yahoo Sports credibility by doing this, and the fact that he said I don't know if the money would work, but theoretically it's cap. Capital C-A-P, cap. And I think it is what's the word I'm looking for? Irresponsible. I think it is irresponsible for Vincent Goodwill to be credentialed by Yahoo Sports and to just go out here and say a bunch of nonsense with nothing to back it up. But I want to tell you this. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. If it was possible, I would do it 10 times out of 10 times. And there's only one reason I would do this. And it has nothing to do with playing basketball at all. No, you can't trust Joel Embiid to get healthy. You can't trust Jimmy Butler to stay healthy. You can't trust Paul George to play more than 2 games in a row without getting a splinter in his pinky. The only reason I would say yes to this is because Paul George is on a 4-year contract and Jimmy Butler has 1 year left plus a player option. In most cases, you wouldn't trade for a player like Jimmy Butler unless you think you can sign him to a long-term deal. But if Jimmy Butler coming here for 1 year and then leaving gets you out of the Paul George contract, yes, 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 yes. Plus, you're trading a soft fraud loser for Jimmy Butler. Capped or fact? Let me know in the chat. I'm out.